We're welcoming Panduranga here today, and it's my great pleasure because we've been friends for over 25 years at Ananda, usually in the context of music, either kirtans that we've been playing in together or choir, singing it together in the choir, or even small groups. And in all this time, I've always been impressed with you, Panduranga, that you had the aura of a professional musician. You just had that air of confidence about you. And I always enjoyed that very much. Can you tell us what led up to that? Just more about your musical history and how you became a musician and how you found the path.
Well, I was really fortunate at the age of 13. My brother gifted me with guitar lessons for my 13th birthday. So that's when I first started learning guitar, and it was my first real musical experience. I'd sung in like the children's choir at church before that. And at the age of 13, I started playing guitar and really put my whole heart and soul into it, so much so that the first Christmas after my birthday, my parents actually bought me an electric guitar and an amplifier. So I was off and running, and that was in the mid-60s. So I played guitar since I was 13, and also I took that knowledge and wanted to learn how to play piano. So I took all the guitar knowledge I had and transferred it to teaching myself piano, where I'd learn all the chords and learn how to play melodies and all that. So I started learning different instruments in that way. But it was always from a more intuitional level. I wasn't the best at reading music and wasn't that much interested in reading music. I was more interested in creating the sound. So that's why I learned to play guitar the way I did, and actually taught myself the piano and keyboards in that way. And interesting enough, over time I realized people either have kind of one of two tracks in music. They either learn to read music and they become very proficient at it and they can perform anything, but they're not that good at improvising and using their intuition. Where I'm on the other end of the spectrum, where everything I do is more intuitional and improvisational, actually. And I can read music, but it's a chore. I have to sit there and virtually work it out versus sight reading. And I think that's helped me a lot in my music, because everything comes more from inside, being heartfelt and feeling the inspiration. And so that's how my music career started, and I went through periods of playing in rock and roll bands from the time I was in my early 20s until I was almost 40, playing professionally for a couple of years, actually traveling around the country, playing 6 nights a week and making a great living, well, not a great living, $200 a week doing that. But then after that became more serious and went to architecture school, and that's where I got my training in architecture. But I kept the music up, playing in bands and also playing some on my own. So then as time went on, I actually became a devotee of Yogananda, and that came through music, because in the 70s I heard an album by Yes, and there was a liner note that mentioned autobiography of a yogi. And I had been a philosophy major and read all these philosophy books on yoga, but I didn't know the experience of yoga. So that really piqued my interest, because the autobiography would be someone who actually knows yoga, lives yoga, is yoga. So I was always interested in that book. And it wasn't until about a decade later, when I was in architecture school, I went to the bookstore and I was in the Eastern philosophy area looking for something to pique my interest, and I saw Autobiography of a Yogi. And I just immediately grabbed it, because that was still sitting in my consciousness. So I read the book and it just spoke to me just directly. And I felt, this is my path, this is my teacher, this is my guru. So from there, I took SRF lessons and really dove into the teachings. And this is while I was in architecture school. Well, long story short, a few years later, I was looking direly to get connected with SRF because that's all I knew about Master. And I was in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and I couldn't find any connection there with Master. So I just prayed, I want to get connected with you. So about that time, a friend from Dallas invited me to come down. He was an architect, to review his work and maybe go work for him. So I went to Dallas for a few days vacation, and he showed me around all his work that he had done. And the last one, he said, this woman's into all this new age stuff. There's crystals in the walls, and she's got a meditation room, and she's very nice, but just kind of off the wall a little bit. And I said, sounds fine to me. So we went and looked at the house and introduced myself to her, and then she had to leave to pick up her children. And before we left, my friend said, oh, I forgot to show you the meditation room. So he took me in the meditation room, and I walked in, and my hair just stood up on end, literally. I was just blasted by this love and energy of the Masters. And it was Master's message to me, you found what you've been asking for here in Dallas. So I went back to Milwaukee, I quit my job, and I moved to Dallas. I gave 2 weeks notice, moved to Dallas. When I got to Dallas, I called this person up whose house I was in, and it happened to be Jan Shapiro. And I said, hi Jan, I met you a couple of weeks ago, and I want to join SRF. And she said, I'm not in SRF, I'm a part of Ananda. And I said, well, what's Ananda? And she said, well, SRF is monks and nuns, Ananda is family. And I said, well, whatever Ananda is, Master brought me here. So from that point on, I became a main fixture in the Dallas music group and the Dallas community. That's right when it started becoming community. Pranaba and Parvati moved there shortly after that, and we had a community for a couple of years. So I was deeply involved in the music in Dallas and was there for 3.5 years before I moved to Ananda. So with the music scene there, I brought all my experience from playing 20 years in rock and roll bands and learned to play the festival, which was very useful, but also I really learned a great lesson because I have always had music going in my head. You know, day and night, there's a record playing. And the record was usually a record of something that I was interested in or learning to play, or something that just struck my fancy, and it was always going around in my head. But once I found Master and Ananda and Ananda's music, I took off the old records and I put on the new records. And the new records were chants, usually, of Masters or Swamijis. And from there, it just changed my life completely because I always had this music going through my head that was devotional. And that is where I really changed my music to be more heartfelt and to take all those feelings and to feel the music in my heart. And that's where the music would come after that.
Well, we all know that Swamiji has composed quite a bit of music, over 400 pieces. And so that's no small thing. How did you, Panduranga, how did you choose which songs and chants you wanted to include in this particular album out of all those 400 pieces?
Well, this CD, Life is a Dream, is actually my second CD. The first CD was From Joy I Came, which is all Yogananda chants, cosmic chants. So the second CD is Life is a Dream, and they're all Swami Kriyananda's compositions. So I wanted to have a combination of chants and also songs that Swami had written, because they're different in how we relate to chants versus songs, and they're heartfelt in different ways. And the reason I do instrumental music, as I was mentioning before, is for japa, like this record that's always playing. I find instrumental music is very good for that because you can have it and be inconspicuous. You can play it at work, you can have it on the car, and it just gets in your consciousness. So I tried to find songs that I could relate to, that I could play on guitar and actually bring the melody out in the guitar techniques and be able to tune into Swami's vibration and really bring that forward. So I would go through the chant book and see which chants fit well to my playing style, and then his individual songs, which ones I really had a feeling for, heart-wise. And that's why Life is a Dream, I Live Without Fear, Sri Yogananda just speak to me so much about Swamiji and his vibration. And so it was just kind of culling through things that actually fit the way I like to play.
In various contexts, Swamiji was always prone to saying, if you want to know me, listen to my music. And I think one could even say that doing more than listen to music, playing the music, singing the music, making it part of yourself makes that even more an intense experience. But I would like to know from you personally, how do you know Kriyananda from having played and worked with his music all these years?
What I find is when I dive deep into the songs, I really try to tune into Swami's consciousness. And I think the one specifically that took me deep was Sri Yogananda, because if you think about it, Swami was with Master for years, and he had a personal relationship with him. And we have a relationship with our Guru, but we haven't had that physical contact. And Sri Yogananda, when I started thinking about it, it's Swami just really talking to Master, and with his consciousness and his knowledge of knowing Master and saying, fill me with your presence and I want to be one with you. And so I tried to tune into that aspect of Swami's just so innate knowledge of Master and how he wrote that chant. And so when I recorded that, I just tried to feel that vibration. And I know it works when I'm sitting in the studio and I've recorded it, or I start adding other tracks and I hear the playback and I can just feel my heart open up, and I know I've done my job in that. And I felt that many times while making this recording. And it's amazing to me that we are able to tune into that. And there's an expression, there's actually a song called Master's Radio that was recorded back in the 50s or 60s. It's really referring to Christ, Jesus being the Master and tuning into Master's radio. But I think of it as Master's, Yogananda's radio, because in all his chants and all of Swami's chants, they got into a vibration with each of these chants and sowed that in the ether. So that vibration is still there. So if we tune into Master's radio or Swami's radio, we can tune into the actual vibration that they imbued into each of these chants. And that's really what I try to do, is tune into that vibration and then express it through my playing. And that's where the intuitive part really comes in to my playing, because I don't read music, but when I play something and I put it down and then I play back with it and add other tracks, I intuitively just hear and feel other melodies and textures and ways of making the music more heartfelt. And so when I record, it's actually kind of a magical experience. I don't plan it out. I just play it back and let Master, Swamiji, intuition just flow through me, and I put the tracks down and then later mix it and try to bring out that heartfelt feeling. And I think I'm successful a lot of the time doing that.
I'd love to hear you share something about your creative process in the studio and how you layer the different tracks and create a beautiful wall of sound. I think our listeners would love to hear more about that.
The creative process I go through after I decide on a song and I've played it some and I feel I can do it justice, then I'll lay down the main melody. and get that exactly right, and then go in and actually edit it so I create the whole song one time through with the actual guitar melody. And then I start layering on different pieces. And I had a dream once. I don't know if it was super conscious, but in this dream I was hearing music and I was composing it. As I was composing it, I could hear it. And I was just conducting this orchestra. And as I conducted the orchestra and thought and felt these feelings, the music just came out. It was how I imagined Swami heard his songs that he simply said they were just given to me and he wrote them down. Or how Mozart composed, he would just hear complete pieces and write them down completely. So not that I do that completely, but I'm able to do that in a way that I intuit melodies and counter melodies to go with what I've already recorded. So I do that in my recording process. I'll do the melody, and then I'll add 2 or 3 layers of guitar, different kind of guitars, 12-string, 6-string, classical guitar, and then I'll do different melodies with each guitar. And then I will do keyboards and anything from piano to strings to harmonium. So I add all these different layers depending on the song, and it creates what some people call like a wall of sound, where there's all these sounds that come together to create one universal blended sound. But it's, you don't hear just one thing because there's so many things going on, but they work together and just create this ambiance that uplifts the vibration and really expresses the heartfelt music and the composition. So that's kind of how I do that. I layer it all together, and then virtually the mixing process is when it all comes out. You turn things up, turn things down, have things evolve. I think one of the pieces that's real clear in illustrating that is Go With Love. Go With Love is a very simple song. Many of the chants are very simple and short, so I have to figure out a way to make them lengthier. Usually the songs are 4 to 5 minutes long. So Go With Love, it just starts with a simple melody. It starts with a simple melody, and then I start adding layers. There's a string melody that comes in, and then other guitars, and then counter melodies, and then a whole string section, and then piano. And so by the time you get to the end, it's this whole orchestra playing Go With Love, and it just opens your heart, and you just feel this whole blessing, and then it comes back down to just the guitar at the very end. So that's a very good example of really how I produce the music and create this wall of sound, so to speak.
You've also been very creative in the realm of architecture. So I'd love to hear how the similarities and differences between music and architecture as far as your creative process is concerned.
It's interesting that before I came to Ananda, I had really 2 other careers. I had the career of being an architect and a career of being a musician, both professionally, where that's all I did for a living. And they're very similar in their creative process for me, in that it really involves intuition. You have to start with learning how to do the task, to do the architecture, to do the music, but then it really gets down to intuition, to how you perform or create with that. And that was a process of learning to trust myself. And I learned that specifically, I think, in music first, because I did that professionally, traveling for a couple of years playing, and I was the only guitarist in the band, so I was responsible for a lot of the lead guitar work and being creative in that way, because everything is really improvisational when you get to that level. So I learned to trust myself and to really enjoy letting that intuition flow. So when I learned to be an architect, I transferred that into the design aspect by trusting my intuition. It was harder in architecture because you're creating something that people are going to live in or use, and it's something concrete, literally, versus music comes and goes. So I learned to do that in architecture and to trust my intuition, and over the years being here at Ananda and being the architect here and designing and building temples and schools and the retreat center, I've learned to trust that even more. So I think it's learning to trust that Master will flow through you if you open yourself up to his guidance and to his intuition. And I've learned to trust that I can do that by putting the ego aside and letting Master flow through me, Swami flow through me, and to be a channel for that, and just not allow the ego to get in the way, but trust yourself and trust the tools that you know and that you have to produce something that's beautiful and can inspire people.
This whole process of working on the music and making these albums, how has it helped you to grow spiritually?
In a spiritual aspect, I think learning to trust myself and to trust my intuition to allow that flow to happen has really helped my spiritual growth, because it allows me to relax into myself, into what I feel, and understand that that intuition is really coming from somewhere else. It's not coming from the ego part, but coming from a greater reality, from the vibrations of these songs being in the ether. And I feel the same thing with architecture. The architecture is already in the ether. Let me explain how that really happens. I firmly believe, and I know, we're living in this material world, but in the causal world, this temple has been here all along. And I really see Babaji as the chief architect of this. He manifested, here he's Golden Palace, Golden Temple for him. My whole design process was always praying to Master and Babaji to inspire me to help bring this temple into fruition. The architecture is already in the ether, and to bring that into manifestation is identical to doing that with the music. So it's to trust yourself and to be open to the guidance, I think, is a real asset on the spiritual path. So in meditation, I trust where I'm going is where God wants to lead me. So I go deep into that feeling and allow myself to just go with that flow.
What has been the most challenging aspect of making this album for you?
Well, I am a perfectionist on a lot of levels, so I think the biggest challenge is realizing at some point you've done your best, and you can always hear things that aren't right or little things you would have done different. But accepting that and really stepping back and feeling the vibration from it, and when I feel it in my heart and when I play it back and I just feel the love or the peace coming through it, I've done my work. Even if I know I can pick it apart and say I should have done this note different or whatever, I feel that is the biggest challenge for me, is just letting that go. The other challenge is just dealing with my physical attributes as a musician, because I have my limitations. And so I hide that by just doing what I do well and knowing that I can't do things I can't do. I mean, I have small hands and little fingers. So playing the piano, playing guitar, I am limited on what I can virtually do. But I can do what I can do very well, and I'm very confident in that. So I just do the best I can with what I got, and we go from there.
Was there anything especially surprising for you about creating this album?
I think actually being able to create music that I hear back and I really appreciate the beauty of it was a surprise. Because when I first started doing this, I virtually started in Dallas in a closet with my guitar and a cassette 4-track recorder, playing guitar chants with just 1 track or 2 tracks. and they were very nice. I really enjoyed them. But being able now, with having a home studio where I can put on 16 different tracks of music and everything, the beauty that you're able to create it's surprising in that you can do that as an individual, but also the technology is really available to make that happen. And I'm surprised by how beautiful some of it is. So it's been a blessing to be a part of that.
Is there anything more you want the listeners to get from this album or to know about the process of creating this album?
I think the main thing is to realize that music is just a way to tune in to the divine. And any music we listen to affects us. And so we need to choose the music that we listen to and take responsibility for what we listen to. And to tune into the music that's going to uplift your consciousness and tune you in to your highest self and the higher realms. So I hope you appreciate the music that I've produced, and I hope it can guide you to a higher level of consciousness and intuition. So a way my music is available to be heard, of course, is on Ananda Radio. I hear all the time from friends that hear me on Ananda Radio. They're not sure what it is, then they hear and they find out it's me, so I'm on Ananda Radio all the time. Both of my CDs are available at crystalclarity.com, which is Crystal Clarity Publishers. And I also have my own website, which is panduranga.net, and my music is available there. But also I have videos of some of my songs that are put to video. Those are available there, and other aspects of my music. So I appreciate your patronage and patronage of Ananda Radio and Crystal Clarity.